Good evening, everyone. I'm Douglas Hill. I'm co-director of Pasadena Photography Arts, and I want to welcome you to our latest edition of Forum. I want to thank you for joining us. The Forum is sponsored by Pasadena Photography Arts, a project of the nonprofit Emerge program at Fulcrum Arts. Our mission is to bring a greater awareness, a greater awareness of photography to the east side of Los Angeles and help emerging photographers achieve visual and career success at all levels. Pasadena Photography Arts presents a monthly program here on Zoom. The forum normally alternates with open show each month. Our next guest on November 1st will be the legendary photographer and educator, Daryl Curran. These programs are free to attend, but they cost money to put on. By the way, tonight's presentation has been underwritten very generously by Britt Salveson. To keep them free, we ask that you donate whatever you can by visiting our website, pasadenaphotographyarts.org, and clicking on one of the donate buttons. They're hard to miss. For those of you who have not experienced Open Show, it's an international platform now in 13 countries designed to give photographers at all levels an opportunity to show and discuss their creative projects. If you would like to submit your project to Open Show, go to openshow.org, select Submit a Project, then scroll down to our venue. We are OS-Pasadena East LA. Since we began, we've helped over 120 photographers get their work in front of an audience. While we welcome your donations, we also want your feedback. If you have comments or suggestions, shoot us an email. You can also follow us on our platforms at Facebook and Instagram. I'd like to point out that although the audience will be muted for the duration of this event, everyone will have the opportunity to type questions and comments into the chat. The event is also being recorded and will be made available on Pasadena Photography Arts YouTube channel. And with that, tonight, it's our great pleasure to present Ibarionex Perello, Finding My Visual Voice with Photography, which is made possible in part by a generous contribution from Britt Salveson. As many of you know, Ibarionex is a writer, an educator, and host of the Candid Frame photography podcast, but he is also a photographer with over 25 years of experience in the field. In his role as host and producer of the Candid Frame, he provides frank, insightful interviews with some of the industry's top established and emerging photographers. The popular show has featured guests including Jay Maisel, Mary Ellen Mark, Joel Meyerowitz, Pete Turner, Lynn Goldsmith, Elliot Erwitt, and Dwayne Michaels, and enjoys a following among photo enthusiasts from all over the world. The weekly program is consistently ranked among the top programs of its type. Ibarionex is also the author of 5 books, including Chasing the Light, Improving Your Photography Using Available Light, 5D Mark III, From Snapshot to Great Shots, and Adobe Masterclass, Photoshop. He is also the co-author of Visual Stories, Behind the Lens with Vincent Laforet and Portraits of Strangers. His photographs and articles have appeared in numerous publications and websites, including Digital Pro, Photo Pro, Outdoor Photographer, Rangefinder, Shutterbug, Popular Photography, DP Review, and Scott Kelby's Light It magazines. He has also served as an adjunct professor at the Art Center College of Design, and he is currently a production fellow at Maximum Fun, which produces several programs, including NPR's Bullseye with Jesse Thorne. He currently lives in Los Angeles with his wife and their 2 dogs, Spencer and Zooey. Welcome, Ibarionex.
Thank you, Douglas. I really appreciate it. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone. I'm a real fan of PPA ever since Bill Wishner introduced me to the group. So I'm really honored to have the chance to be able to talk to you and share my story and my photography with you. let me just immediately just go into sharing my screen. And I wanted to do something a little, excuse me, a little different. Usually when I speak, it's mostly instructional. I teach a lot of workshops throughout the country and outside of the U.S. as well. And I thought that I take off my teacher hat and really just talk about my personal journey in terms of being a photographer. And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to start off with this one image. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then
Ibarionex, if I may, just can you hit full screen
full screen.
so
Okay.
we can see that image a little bit larger?
Okay. Um, It'll go into the slideshow, which I'm trying to avoid.
Okay. All right.
So
That's
that's why I'm
okay.
showing it this way.
My apologies for interrupting.
No problem. And then the images are just going to be cycling through. I don't think I'll be talking about any image specifically. But if anyone has any questions about an individual image at some point, you can just make note of it in the chat, and I'll be glad to respond to it later. But I am the son of immigrants. Both of my parents were born and raised in the Dominican Republic, and they came into the United States through New York during the big migration during the late 50s. I was born there, but we moved to Los Angeles when I was about 2 or 3 years old. And growing up, it was very sort of awkward for me. And I know a lot of photographers can probably say that their childhood was kind of awkward, but for me, it was awkward largely because though I look like I'm African American, I'm actually Afro Latino, and I wasn't surrounded by that Dominican community that largely existed in New York or in Miami. So the language, speaking Spanish, the food, the culture was kind of isolated into my own household or the household of my aunts and uncles. Um, and so almost immediately there was this feeling of otherness, being separate from so many other people. And it also was just a very self-conscious kid, which resulted in me having like a stutter, which sometimes still manifests itself. And it was always so awkward for me to be able to develop friendships, to really be able to connect with other people. And as a result, I struggled with not only identity, but sense of self-worth. And at one point, when I was about 10 or 11, my dad signed us up to become members of the Boys Club of Hollywood, which was near the print shop where he worked at near Hollywood. And during that time, one of the counselors there, Mike Cohen, restored an old darkroom that had fallen into disuse, and he invited two photojournalists to come to the club and show me and probably 6 or 7 or 8 other kids how to load a film camera, how to process film and make prints. And I was immediately captivated by that. And this is one of the first images that I remember making there and making a print of. And this was a picture that I made at the club. And this was probably within the first couple of months of me practicing photography. And I remember this moment very vividly. I remember having the camera in my hand, and this was a competition that was happening between different boys clubs, and they had different competitions for billiards and table soccer and table tennis and all these different things. That's why there are so many kids in the background looking at this kid playing pool. But I remember framing this shot and being absolutely conscious of everything that was in the frame, focusing on the cue ball and the kid and his intense face, recognizing that I wanted the moment right before he hit the ball, thinking about the kids in the background. And even though I didn't really have a I wasn't really educated in terms of what photography was and what goes into composition. Almost instinctively, I knew what I wanted from the photograph. And when I made the photograph and eventually made the print, uh, I was so excited. And I remember coming down after I'd made the print and showing people, and I got this incredible reaction from the other counselors and the other kids at the club. And I was filled with this incredible sense of accomplishment and pride that I don't think I'd ever really experienced before. So for photography, for me, became this combination of the possibility of being able to create something, but also being able to create something in which um, could evoke a reaction in someone else. And that for me was um, incredibly powerful. It was very empowering, and it was really intoxicating. And so what I would do is whenever I would go to the club, I would just go upstairs and grab a camera and rolls of film, and I would just go out around the club and or hit the streets of Hollywood and just make photographs. And then I would, as soon as the roll of film was finished, I would make a mad dash back to the darkroom, and I would just spend hours there. I loved being in that room by myself and having this, you know, this ritual inside of that room, you know, moving the tanks back and forth, you know, watching the arms of the timer as the prints would develop in the developing tray, and then seeing the result in my hand and having this physical manifestation of what I had seen minutes or hours before. And it was incredibly powerful for me. And as I grew older, um, I still made photographs, but I never really thought that photography would be a livelihood. I never really considered it as a career option. I grew up in South LA, and I really didn't see photographers of color when I was there. So the idea of that was something that I could do for a living was just, it was just something that I kind of did for fun. But eventually I ended up at a Los Angeles community college, and I ended up joining the newspaper there. And that was the first time that I actually got to apply not only my love of photography, but also my love of writing. And as I spent time on that paper, I really started to discover that this thing that I had derived so much pleasure from could be a means by which I could express myself, where I could connect with other people, where I could make a difference. And that was really very, very empowering. But I really struggled really thinking about, well, I've never been a particularly good long-term planner. So I went to school, Berkeley, got a degree in English Lit, was intending to go and go to University of Missouri and get a master's degree for photojournalism, but I said I'd take a year off, and eventually didn't end up going back. But I ended up working at Nikon Incorporated down in Torrance, California, and that was actually quite the godsend because I had a job as one of their customer service reps, but the main benefit of that job was it allowed me to learn even more about photography because I had access to all the equipment that I could want there. Anything that I wanted to use, I could use. And they encouraged you to use the equipment, so I could grab rolls of Kodachrome or Tri-X and every weekend go out and shoot, and they would pay for the processing and the prints. And that's what I would do every weekend. I would just grab the cameras and I would just be like out there making photographs and learning about you know, what it means to make photographs. And then later on, you know, I left Nikon after 8 years, and then I ended up going to Werner Publishing, who published Outdoor Photographer, uh, DP Review, and so on and so forth. And that's during the time in which I ended up starting the show. So, but during all this time, one of the things that I found so intoxicating about photography was these moments of discovery that I would have when I had the camera. And I naturally gravitated to the streets or situations where there wasn't a formal event, or I didn't have a particular subject in mind. I have made portraits, I have done still lifes, I've done studio stuff. But I was just fascinated by the idea of going out with no expectation and
I'm
seeing what I,
Five Pursuits and
okay, someone needs to mute because I'm hearing you. So for me, there was something really exciting about going out there without a net and seeing what I can find and thinking, can I pull an interesting image out of nothing? And for me, that's always been the inherent joy of it, not just because of the challenge that it presents in terms of whether I can find an interesting photograph. I mean, that's part of it. But for me, it was, can the way that I see the world, can the way that I experience it, see it, can that produce something special? And for me, that's always been, I think, it's so self-affirming for me when I'm able to pull it off. And I think that's why I find that photography, as well as being a meditative practice, is a self-nurturing practice for me. Because there's a great satisfaction in terms of making the photograph. But for me, the most exciting moment is when I'm out and I see the potential of the light, the shadow, the shapes, the people, and the moment hasn't even presented itself yet. There's just a bunch of potential. And that moment fills me with such a thrill and such a moment of excitement that it's like, okay, will it all come together? And will I be ready for the moment? And will I be able to get it? And when I can, it's incredibly satisfying. Um, it's a moment that, even without looking at the image on the back of my screen or pulling it up later on the computer, for me, the chase is about that feeling, that experience of like, oh God, you know, and the only time I get that is when I'm out shooting. And so I think that's probably why I haven't really been really aggressive about pursuing a sort of commercial career, um, because I always found it hard to sort of recreate that feeling when all these things, all these sort of obligations and all these expectations are loaded onto the creation of a picture. I can do it, and I can deliver what's expected, and I can have small moments of discovery under those kinds of circumstances. But there's just something about just going out there with absolutely no expectation and just having that one camera, that one lens, and just going, what's going to happen today? What am I going to see? What am I going to observe? Who am I going to meet? Uh, that for me is something that I've loved. But as with any photographer, there's been any variety of struggles to try and be able to get to that place consistently. At first, it was just the technical, understanding the functions of the camera, and at that point, film, and then later digital. But very relatively quickly, I learned that I didn't need to know everything about photography. I just needed to know enough that I was able to do what I needed to do with a camera. That was it. And once I did that, I was able to sort of let go of this, you know, this obsession with the equipment and the gear. I still like playing with a new toy and, you know, playing around with equipment, but I've become less and less obsessed with the equipment, because for me the moment is really what matters to me. I mean, if I have nothing else but a smartphone, you know, I can produce the kind of image that really satisfies my soul.
Ibarionex, I think we'd
Yeah.
like to see some more pictures.
Oh, has it stopped?
It hasn't run at all. We've been sitting on one slide.
Oh my God, I am so sorry.
That's okay.
I thought these things were playing. Okay, let me stop the share and then I'll try it again. Okay. What are you seeing now?
We're seeing we're starting to see slides.
Okay, let me know if it stops in a single image. So,
Okay. No, they're advancing.
okay, great. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for letting me know. Um, so I started to find that it was less about the equipment and more about my mindset that often was the big determining factor in terms of whether or not I could be in a headspace in which I could recognize moments that otherwise would just pass over for me. And I had to let go of a lot of expectations. One of which was thinking that every time that I went out to make photographs that they had to be good. You know, I wasn't setting myself up for success by going up there and thinking that, okay, if I go out there, I got to produce 12 great, exceptional photographs. Eventually, I was able to focus more on just the process and whether or not I was present more so than anything else. And currently, anytime I go out to shoot, my goal is just one photograph. And I define a successful photograph as a photograph that is different than a photograph I would have made the day before, the week before, the month before, the year before. It's not about, is the photograph great, but does it reflect that I'm stretching myself, that I'm trying to do something different than uh, than I've done before. And sometimes the image isn't completely successful, but if I see something in it that that represents for me a new path that I'm trying to explore, then for me that's a good image. That's a good day's worth of photography. And the other thing was just learning how to be completely present. When I let go of this expectation of the work having to be good and the judgments that I might make about, things are gelling or they're not gelling, by me just being present and accepting everything about the day, I felt like, okay, um, then I'm good. Um, because when I'm present, when I'm fully present, I'm able to observe so much. I'm able to see so many things. I can really get a sense of the potential for any given moment as it's playing out. And for me, that's a big part of the thrill. And I really had to learn to sort of give myself permission to be able to approach photography in my life in that way. Um, for me, photography is is a meditative practice. I may not be sitting in a chair, with my legs crossed, but for me, it's as close to that when I'm out there walking around and observing. I've worked on projects, at home in my own neighborhood, especially during the coronavirus thing. I've still been able to make photographs even around my own household. And it's been really interesting to see myself find things that I otherwise would have ignored or passed over, just as a result of the fact that this is all I have to work with. Can I find something interesting? Can I make interesting photographs? And I've been working on a variety of different projects, which include a long-term project documenting my mother-in-law who is living with us and who we're caring for. But it's also been about just looking at things when I'm going out running errands and simply having my camera in tow and seeing a bunch of shopping carts or whatever, and seeing the potential for something to give me a really interesting photograph, and still experiencing that thrill, even though I may be out for just a half an hour running errands, and yet I can still find those moments for me. Um, the more that I've done this, and the more that I've continued to do this, has made photography for me um, much more than a hobby, much more than a means to make a living. It's been the thing that fulfills me. Doesn't seem to be the right word for it, though it does certainly do that. But there's a there's a joy that's there that's important to me, and I think it's allowed me to appreciate um, the most ordinary and mundane things about life, um, that I otherwise, I think, I would have taken for granted. And I really like that my photographs serve to remind me of the things that so many of us choose to ignore. And when I have the camera with me, or even when I don't even need the camera anymore, sometimes I just see it and I recognize the beauty and the stuff that everyone else is walking past and ignoring. I realize that there's inherent beauty and things to be grateful for, um, at any different moment of the day, whether I'm in Tokyo, whether I'm in Paris, whether I'm in Pasadena, whether I'm in downtown Los Angeles. Um, there's something there. And I like finding it. I like seeing it. I like discovering it. I like making the photographs. Um, I wish I could do that, you know. If I could spend so much of my time just doing that, I would just be just this kid in a candy store. Um, there are a lot of other things that I do in my life work-wise that are very gratifying, but there's just nothing that compares to, you know, putting on some comfortable shoes, grabbing my camera and walking out the door. Nothing like it at all. And when I teach photography, because I teach workshops, I teach street photography workshops, and I've taught a workshop in Tokyo and in New York and all these different places. And when I do that, I'm really hoping that, along with teaching people how to see the world a little differently, that they get a taste of what I feel when I'm making photographs. That for me is ultimately what I've been hoping to share with people when I do presentations, but especially with the books that I've written. It's this whole idea is like, if I can strike that spark in somebody else so they can feel even a tenth of what I feel like I'm successful. And I think to a large degree, I've been able to do that with a lot of people, which is really gratifying. And when I get to see their journey from when we begin our time together to the end, I can see those moments of discovery, even though they may not completely recognize it themselves. Um, Sometimes I see it, and that gets me excited. Um, all these photographs here, which are basically an amalgam of stuff that I've shot over really a long period of time, over the last probably 20, 25 years. Um, I look at these photographs, and I can tell you so much about where I was in those particular moments. Um, as as lovely as I think the photographs are, they speak so much in terms of where I was, both physically, but also in terms of mentally and spiritually to a great degree. You know, I see my life laid out in these photographs. And for me, that's really important because I have one of those critical voices in my head, like a lot of you probably do. And it hasn't always been very positive. Um, I've learned to listen to it less and less over the last, couple of couple of years, more than a couple of years. But when I look at these photographs that I've made over all these decades, I I have such of a greater appreciation for who I've been during this time, because some of these images were made during very dark times in my life, but I don't see it in these photographs. I see hopefulness. I see joy. I see happiness. I see so much of what's good uh, in these photographs. And I think that that's really, I'm impressed about that when I think about it. Because I know how dark um, some of some of those periods were, where I felt, moments of hopelessness and, you know, deep depression and anxiety, and, where many of those thoughts were sort of preoccupying my time and my thoughts. Yet I take a look at these photographs and I don't see evidence of any of that in these images. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think that it's not that just photography provided me a outlet, a stress reliever. I think that what photography was doing for me was allowing me to reveal and express the better parts of me. And these photographs are proof of that, which is why I think I keep returning to it over and over and over again, and why I can't imagine that there will ever be a day where I'm not making photographs or thinking about making photographs. So my journey in terms of how I shoot photographs has really been so much about a journey about me um, not discovering myself. I don't think that really is an accurate way, but um, it's been the way by which I have learned to keep myself company during this thing that I call my life. Um, I've learned that I'm a much better companion than I imagined myself to be. because these photographs demonstrate that I've been a marvelous tour guide in many ways when it comes to how I have observed and experienced this time on Earth that I've had. I have no idea what I'm going to do with my work. You know, much of the work that I have created has been shared in the many magazine articles that I've written and the books that I've written and the teaching that I do. My wife is often asking me, you know, you should put a book of your best images and so on and so forth. It's just something that I'm likely to do at some point. Um, there's so much more that I want to do that I'm always thinking about not the images I've made, but the images that I'm going to make. As soon as I see a photograph, even when I've made a print of it, there's a great satisfaction of it that I get, but I'm already thinking, man, I can't wait to get out again. Because I want to go out there and just, I really want to reclaim that feeling again. And when I look at the print that I've made, or I see the image on the screen, it's satisfying, but not as satisfying as going out and just discovering that new moment. So, and I think that any person who's a photographer has to understand what is the underlying reason, not the underlying reason, but what is driving you to make pictures. I know it's great to be creative, it's satisfying to make a photograph, but what is that thing that's creating that fire in you that you can't extinguish it? And you may not know the answer immediately, but know that it's probably there, especially if you're spending your Thursday evening watching this. It may not be the same reason I do it. It may be completely different, but it's there. And I think it's important to inquire and try to discover what that is for you, because I think once you do, it's the thing that allows you to keep pushing when all the circumstances or there's evidence to the contrary that tells you that you should stop, that you should give up, that you should not go out and make photographs, that you shouldn't share them, that you know, whatever it is, all that self-talk. Because once you understand what that is, what you're in pursuit of, other than the creation of the photographs, that's the stuff that will keep you going during those moments. I know that it is for me. I'm struggling now, but for the same reason you guys are in terms of COVID and all the restrictions that we have. But even though I may not be going out and making photographs as often as I would like, I still have that fire inside my chest, you know. And even if I make just one photograph today, it's like, you know, there's a satisfaction that I have there, because it isn't about the number of photographs that I've made. Is that, did I get to practice what I love to do? And that for me is at the heart of what makes what I do and have always done so special and so precious to me. So that's it. I'll be glad to take some questions. But real quick, I just want to share a couple of things, because I am notorious for not being the best self-promoter. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay. This is my podcast. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is my podcast, The Candid Frame. It's, as Douglas mentioned before, I've been doing it since 2006. We're up to 530. It's available on iTunes, Google Podcast, any service that allows you to listen to podcasts. You can do it. I have a podcast app that you can download off of Android or Apple Podcasts or the Apple Store. That gives you access to all of the episodes. You'll find links here. Hopefully they're working. If you want to follow me on Instagram, which is where I post fairly regularly, that's just my name, Ibarionex. And lastly, this is the most recent book, Making Photographs, Developing a Personal Visual Workflow. It's available from Rocky Nook. And if you use the promo code Perello40, that's Perello, numeral 40, you can get 40% off the list price for the book. And there are links for all of these things on the website at thecandidframe.com. So,
Ibarionex, thank you so
yes.
much. It's incredibly powerful work, and it watching the slides had this incredible, for me anyway, cumulative effect of it was like entering a world. Um, One of our advisors, Roland Patugan, said these are windows through time, space, and your spirit. And you had mentioned that you weren't sure that the spirit came through to others, but it absolutely does. At least it did for me, and
Oh, thank you, Douglas.
Roland's as well. I have uh, uh, several questions, and there are others who are certain to ask questions as well. Because you've been doing the podcast now for so long, you've been talking to photographers, and so many of them. Um, has that changed who you are as a photographer, or do you even know? I mean, is the influence so sort of seamless, or there are moments that you've had on the podcast you said, "Wow, this changes everything for me."
Well, there's a couple of ways of answering that. One of them has been that in speaking with these people, some of whom are people I've admired forever, I was able to sit with them and be treated as a peer. You know, sitting across from Mary Ellen Mark or Sam Abel or, any Dan Winters, and to be able to sort of hold my own in a conversation with them, even though I wasn't nearly as accomplished as they were, but have them appreciate what I was bringing to the table was incredibly flattering and affirming. And so when I would share my work with them or I would share my insights, I would get back that, you know, um, that I wasn't just some fraud with a microphone. Um, but the other thing that I got from it was that there was no singular path for what I was doing. That I would interview all these hundreds of people from all these diversity of backgrounds and different areas and genres of interest, and all of them found their way to where they were in any myriad of ways. And that was always something I didn't know. I always felt like there was this certain thing you had to do in order to achieve any success, and it's allowed me to be okay with the fact that the path that I've created for myself is unlike anything that I've seen out there, right? Because after I left the magazine, I just went freelance, and this podcast has been primarily the means by which I have created this bubble for myself in the photographic world, where I'm known by all these people, where I've got gain access and opportunities that I never would have gotten simply being some freelance writer producing countless magazine articles. And so in those ways, the show has really sort of um, changed changed my life in the way and the way that I work.
I'd like to read a couple of things that people have said. Thank you, Ibarionex. This is from April Nosifora. Thank you, Ibarionex. Love hearing you speak. Your words always go straight to my heart, and I understand and feel your words.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Derek Goldberg says, Ibarionex, great presentation. Of all your interviews, which one has left the greatest impression on you, positive or negative?
Oh man, that's really hard. Because sometimes I can't even remember who I've interviewed. It's, there's so many. You know, I really can't speak to one particular interview. You know, saying that it goes without saying that sitting down with my photographic heroes is quite intoxicating. You know, sitting down with Bill Allard, Mary Ellen Mark, um, Sam Abel, people whose work I've been following since I was in high school and college, and having and being able to talk to those people, and develop with some people who I've developed friendships with. For me, those mean tremendous things to me. But there have also been conversations that I've had with people where um, they've given me incredible gifts. Um, there's some people whose work I've seen, and I really don't know much about them personally. I just discover their work and I go, I just want to talk to this person. And the resulting conversation has been so rich and so satisfying that it just leaves me incredibly happy and fulfilled. And I know that once people get a chance to listen to that conversation, they're going to experience the same thing I did. So second to photography, are these conversations on the podcast. So anytime that I get surprised in a conversation, that's great, because I spend a lot of time researching as much as I can with because I don't work from notes when I interview people. I don't have a list of questions. I don't work that way. It doesn't work for me. I just read and listen to as much as I can, and then I just jump into the conversation and just listen from then on. But every once in a while, I'll just have a wonderful sit down with someone, and when that happens, it's just magical.
So maybe the answer to that is to um, check in and listen to the podcasts.
Oh yeah.
Okay, another couple of things. Wonderful, just wonderful. That's from iPad, someone who's decided to remain anonymous. David Green says, so much of your style comes from the perspective you have developed over years of shooting, but certainly some comes from the way you approach your processing. Can you please talk a little bit about your darkroom, lightroom approach?
God, that's always in flux. There's been, I think, well, my digital process is really an extension of what I've done in the darkroom. I for the large part, I tried not to do much more than I would do in the darkroom. So dodging and burning and adjusting contrast. You know, you use that with variable contrast filters with paper, but now you have all these tools in Photoshop and Lightroom. Now I'm getting a lot more playful with it. Right now I'm working with individual colors to a degree that I didn't do before, using the various channels in Lightroom. I'm really seeing what I can produce on the screen and on the print, um, as as seeing what I want to evoke in the photograph. I'm not so much looking to evoke a specific and consistent style. I know that a lot of photographers will kind of do that. Um, but for me, I look at that photograph and it's like, what is it important about this photograph that I want to express in it? And what things are taking away from it? So I'm always asking what is enhancing the photograph and what's diminishing it. And sometimes it's those things that inform what I do. Like some of the images that I convert over to black and white is just because the colors are distracting from what I think is the most important thing. So everything that I shoot is in color. I shoot raw for everything. And there are certain pictures that I know just work will work even better if it's black and white, just because I know that there's something red or there's something white or there's something that's just pulling away from the thing that's at the heart of the image. But I'll play a lot with curves adjustments, dodging and burning, isolating only segments of it. But I don't spend a lot of time. If I'm spending 15 minutes on a picture, that's a long time for me. I spend enough time sitting in front of a computer. I am not one of those people who's going to spend 3 hours on one photograph. Shoot me if I do
Right.
that.
Fair enough. Um, Gail Nichols Ali says, thank you for your
Oh,
presentation.
Gail.
Brings back memories of our first meeting. And somebody else, beautiful work, love the use of available light. Scott Herman asked, do you take single images or rapid bursts? Select which ones you feel is the best.
Oh, yeah, good question. I'm a single image guy. I do not use the continuous drive mode of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making a conscious choice to press the button. And I sometimes may take 3 in rapid succession, but it's my finger who's controlling it. And for me, it's like I said during the presentation, it's all about anticipation. I am anticipating a specific moment playing out in front of me. And I found when I've tried to use the continuous drive mode, even if it's 9 frames per second, the moment can happen in between the frames. And for me, the challenge and the satisfaction comes is like, you know, I could, like, there's one shot that I have of these 2 guys encountering each other on a street corner. And they have this sort of, they almost bump into each other. And they have this sort of mad dog moment when he looks at him. And that moment was just like that. But when I situated myself on that corner, I saw the possibility of convergence happening with different people coming from different directions. And I just framed my shot when that moment happened. And as it played out, I knew the exact moment there. And it probably lasted 2 seconds, if that, 3 seconds, right? But it was like, and I just made that one single frame because I'd seen the overall scene, I was able to make the frame and the overall composition. And when I saw these 2 guys walking towards each other at the relatively same pace, I knew that they were going to meet. I didn't know exactly what would happen, but I said, something's going to happen. So I just stood there. So when that moment played out, it was just like, it was that sort of magical thing that I'm always trying to capture. And when I'm lucky, I'm ready for it.
It's a magical thing, but you can't force it.
No, no
You just
way.
have to be ready when it does happen.
Yeah.
Let's see. Michelle E says, wonderful presentation. Thank you for your insightfulness. Ellen Friedlander says that you had mentioned using one camera and one lens. Can you expand on that?
I like keeping it simple. For a long time, for the last 5 years, I've been using like a X100 series, a Fuji X100 series, which has the equivalent of a 35 millimeter lens on it. And it's just like, it's less to think about. I don't have to think about changing lenses. I don't have to think about a zoom, because with a zoom, I'm constantly, trying to find the right focal length for what I'm shooting. When I'm just using that one focal length, especially one that I've been using over and over again, I know what the world looks like through that lens, even without bringing the camera to my eye. I can walk into a scene and I can make an assessment in terms of where I'm going to stand, what's going to be included, what's not going to be included. And then raising the camera to my eye is just a reaffirmation of that. It's just making very small refinements. And that allows me to both be able to shoot where it's a scene where I'm sort of anticipating something and be able to pull it off, but it also allows me to be able to react effectively when the moment presents itself and I only have seconds to react. right? It's
Right.
just like I only have the moment to raise the camera up, but because I know the camera and that lens so well, I don't have to think about it. Because as soon as I'm thinking about what I'm doing, I'm in the wrong headspace,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
I just have to be, that camera has to be made of like flesh and blood, extension of my arm and my hand and my brain and my eye. So it's like when the moment happens, it's like there's nothing there. And that's why you won't, I'm not going to, I can't walk around with two cameras and going back and forth between the two unless I'm teaching. Um, you know, it's like the less I have to think about with respect to the equipment, the better I am in terms of being able to pull off what I'm trying to pull off.
Bonnie Blake says,
Hey, Bonnie.
Ibarionex, thank you for doing this. Beautiful presentation, your insights and images. Do you have favorite places, environments that you were drawn to?
Any place where I can walk and get lost. That's my favorite. You know, like different parts of Los Angeles. I've been in Paris. I've been to London, but you know, put me in a small town somewhere. You know, I'll get lost and I'll find some trouble. You know, it doesn't. You know, as long as I have I can just walk around and make discoveries. That for me is great. That's all that I need. That and some good light, and I'm a happy camper.
Debbie Arlick says, thank you for sharing so generously, as you always do. I loved seeing your earlier work and how it flows seamlessly with the newer work. It sounds like the thrill you have making photographs is your direct channel to meditation, and that's why you can't stop. It sustains you.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's been interesting looking at the older work because I've been recently been pulling stuff because my Lightroom catalog is a mess. I've been trying to fix it, but I've been going back into some much older stuff, and I was surprised at how uh, consistent I've been in terms of what I've been attracted to. You know, my effectiveness in terms of making more complex photographs has certainly improved since then, but the underlying attraction to people and things and um, that is that's remained a constant, which is kind of interesting to see. Uh, Especially, I've got some older stuff on Kodachrome that I pulled, and I made some discoveries from stuff that I made 27 years ago, and these photographs were really good, and I was surprised that I made them um, because I looked at the photographs because back then, because they were shot on Kodachrome, I would make the photographs, I would look at them, and and then I would just put them back in the slide boxes because it's very expensive to make Cibachromes from slides. So a lot of those images I hadn't really looked at since I had made them, but there were some images there that I didn't understand when I made them. But 25 years later, I looked at them and I could understand why they were good photographs to me now and why I didn't readily recognize why they were then. But something instinctively led me to make the photographs anyway. And some, and for me, that makes perfect sense because I think sometimes when I'm making photographs, either then and now, there's something that is just completely visceral about the experience that has nothing to do with logic or with planning or anything like that. That it's just this spontaneous experience of a moment. And I may not have the understanding of the vocabulary to fully appreciate what I did until later, until I've grown as a person and as a photographer. So I was really glad. And it was only like 3 or 4 images, but for me, 3 or 4 images after 25 years to be able to look at them and go, God damn, that's good.
Mm.
Is very satisfying because I thought it was all going to be crap.
But in a way, you were making pictures at the time for your future self.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that Beethoven talked at times about writing music for the future, and one that he
Oh
would
yeah.
never see. So, yeah, the creative process. Safialia Shabek asks, he says, so many of your images leave such lasting impressions on me. The black and white profile of the boy on the beach with his head hung low enough that you have the bathers in the water above his neckline. The beautiful color image of the women having their hair done outside under scaffolding. The blue skylark with the newspaper on the ground. The girl wearing pink looking toward the light while in queue for ride tickets. The protesters all in red. The weightlifters squatting, and many, many more. I constantly learn from examining your use of light, line, shape, and color. I'm a big fan of your work, my friend.
Oh, Safi, thank you. Thank you. Safi's one of my favorite photographers. She's amazing. So if you guys don't know Safi's work, I interviewed her for the podcast. But she says she admires me. I admire her right back. She's fantastic.
We had the pleasure of having her on Open Show in August.
Oh,
So,
you
yeah.
guys have excellent taste. She's great.
Let's see. Ibarionex, this is from Will Navarro.
Oh, well.
For a student learning to see the light, what do you recommend the first step is?
Pay attention to shadows. You get to learn so much about light by just seeing what kind of shadows you're dealing with. If it's a really bright day with some bright sunny day, you're going to see really hard defined shadows, and you can leverage that for making images that take advantage of that strong contrast between light and dark, and play with exposing for the highlights and letting this blacks go really dark. And then if it's an overcast day where the light's much more even and diffused, it's a good opportunity to shoot very differently, in which you're going to be emphasizing more like line and shape, and relationships of shapes to each other. For me, there's no such thing as bad light. There's different qualities of light. I do not write off any scene now just because I think it's bad light. I was recently looking at some images by Gordon Parks. He has a new book. What is the name of the book? I have it here. It's images that he created during one of his early assignments for Life magazine, and it was an article on crime. And he traveled to different cities, New York, Chicago, making these photographs following police, and these images are absolutely stunning. And one of the things that most impressed me about it was he was shooting color film, slide film. So I think he was probably shooting some version of Ektachrome, where you did not have ISO 400 or 1600. You were dealing with ISO 25 or 50. 50 would have been fast, in 57. But you look at those photographs, and they are stunningly beautiful, insightful, and he was working with very diminished lighting in a good number of these, under circumstances that a lot of people say, well, you can't make a good photograph, and would pass over an opportunity to make those images. And his images are just fantastic. So learning how to see light, learning how to evaluate it, learning to see light as a subject, I think is an essential part of any person becoming a photographer, regardless of what genre they associate with themselves with.
So you've obviously devoted a lot of your life to photography. If you hadn't become a photographer for whatever reason, is there something else that you think, oh, well, that might have become a career path or a life? Or is this something you don't even entertain?
I have no idea. I suspect I've probably been a security guard sometimes. I just don't. I have.
Sometimes something tells me that's probably not true.
But I have no idea. I've been really blessed that even without any sort of specific plan, that my life is gravitated to the very things that I've always enjoyed doing, which is writing and making photographs. Um, so I really can't imagine a life where there's nothing else in my life that provides me as much satisfaction as this does. So I suspect that even if I wasn't doing it in the way that I'm doing it now, that I think that I would have found another path to getting here. I feel like I have no doubt that somehow I'd end up here. I might not be doing, I might have some other job, but I think that once I rediscovered this experience that I talked about in my presentation, that I would find some way of embracing it and getting back to it.
Oh, here's a good question. At least I think it is. And also from Derek Goldberg. Do you always have a camera with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm one of those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't leave the house without a camera. You know, I don't use my phone as much as I probably should, just because it's so easy. But I like having my tool with me. Um, I like pressing the viewfinder to my eye and holding the camera and seeing the world through my viewfinder, and the way my hands feel on it as I'm making the photographs. I know you can do that with a phone, but there's just a nice physical gratification I get from handling my camera and feeling the weight of it in my hands.
I would add to that because I rarely use my phone as a camera as well. There's something about looking into that little black box with the window on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
The world is constantly being framed and reframed, and to me that's an absolutely essential part of it. But and I understand about looking at the display on the back of the camera, but that's a different experience to me. And
Oh
I
yeah,
just
completely. Yeah, I disable the LCD on my camera, so when I take a picture, it doesn't automatically display on the back of it.
right.
And I recently started using the X Pro 3, where you have to flip down the screen in order to see it. I know some people hate that design, but for me, it's perfectly in line because I want to stay in the moment. I don't want to get distracted by what's on the screen.
Right. Right. I noticed on your website that you've done a number of projects.
Mm-hmm.
And do you see those as being sort of more editorial / commercial?
Yeah, the projects are an important part. I've been working on several projects that aren't on the website, but I find um, that the projects are really invaluable to me because they allow me to take everything that I've learned from working in the way that I do, which has largely been on the street, and apply it to different circumstances. Like I did some work for Goodwill Industries. I did a project for the Boys and Girls Club of Hollywood. I'm currently working, as I mentioned, doing a documentary project on my mother-in-law. I'm also doing another long-term project on the morning routines of young families, in which I visit their homes on a Saturday or Sunday morning soon after they get up in the morning, and I'm just a fly on the wall watching the dynamic as these families um, play out their days in the early morning hours. And the same thing that I do on the street, I'm doing on these projects. The thing that it provides me is a level of intimacy that I normally don't have on the street, because I have access to these people's lives in these locations. I'm able to create images that are very difficult to create on the street. Um,
Right.
because with the personal projects, there's a personal engagement that's happening. So it allows me not only to get physically closer, but it also allows me to make photographs that are very different, but that leverage the strengths that I have in terms of the way that I see. And a lot of those images you'll see on the Instagram feed, if you go back about a year, there are a good number of those photographs on there. And increasingly, these personal projects are the things I'm have a much greater interest in focusing on, because I feel like as much as I love the work that I do when I'm traveling around the street, um, I feel like these personal projects offer me a greater challenge than I can get on the street. Um, just because I'm trying to explore things that are more narrative, and that explore larger themes of what it means to be human and what in relationships and things like that. And yeah, I'm enjoying, exploring who I am as a photographer in those ways.
Mm. Good answer. Um, just a couple more things that people have said. Ellen Cantor says, wonderful photographs. Thanks. And Kambua Chema, who says, fantastic presentation and images. Thanks for sharing your vision. I'm a big fan of the Candid Frame.
Oh, thanks.
JD Massey says, Ibarionex, thank you for your inspiration. With your lifelong experience, what was your last photography revelation?
Ooh, wow, that is a great question. Um, I really have to think about that. In terms of, I think that it probably is related to the personal projects where I'm kind of more drawn to those. I think part of it has been the fact that, and this is not completely fleshed out, but I'm feeling that there is something else I'm trying to discover about myself and my work, and that the personal project is the means by which I'm going to be able to discover it. I have no idea what that it thing is, but there's something that's sort of gnawing at me that says that just continuing to photograph how I have photographed for the last 25 years is not going to get me there. And I'm absolutely sure about that. So, but the thing is, I don't know where I'm going and I don't know how I'm going to get there. But I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that the more that I just continue creating situations that are uncomfortable for me, that are unfamiliar, that it will start making sense that the more that I do it. So I think that's been something that's been banding about my head, I think, for the last year.
Mm.
So I'll probably give you a different answer in a year, hopefully. But yeah, I think that would be it.
Well, we'll have to have you back and ask you.
Hopefully, I have an answer.
Okay. Ibarionex, that was great.
Oh, thank you, Douglas.
It's been such a pleasure talking to you and getting to see your work. And we look forward to seeing more in print, and listening to more of the Candid Frame. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
your
you,
time
Douglas,
and for your
and thanks to everyone who joined us tonight. It's a lot of familiar faces, so thank you, my friends who made it out tonight. So hopefully, we get to see you soon in the real world rather than just virtually.
Yeah.
So stay safe, especially those out there near those those hot spots throughout the state.
Yeah.
My thoughts and prayers are with all of you.
Amen to that. Yes. Thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining us. Again, we are very happy to present discussions such as this, presentations that we've just had with Ibarionex. But it does cost us some money, and we appreciate any donations that you can make to us. I'd like to remind everybody that we have an open show coming up in October. I believe it's October 5th. You can find out more about that on our website or by visiting our Facebook page or Instagram. And on November 1st, our next forum will be with legendary photographer and educator Daryl Curran. I hope that you'll be able to join us in those other events. Thank you, everybody, and good night.